Hello and welcome to another episode of Bipolar IQ. This is James Norton, and tonight I'm talking about stigma and how you can be judged for having a mental illness of any sort, whether it's bipolar or whether it's schizophrenia or whether it's uh, recurring depression or whether it's anxiety or really anything. Because a lot of them have that, where people will kind of look at you and say, well, that person's different than me, and that deserves to have some kind of connotations behind it, like they're not as good as me, or they're just, there's someone that I need to be afraid of, or there's someone that doesn't act the same as I do. There's a lot of that. And believe me, I've lived through a lot of it. And anyway, it's something that's very difficult. And, um, it's something that it's like, I don't know. It's something that everyone has to deal with to a certain extent because no one's the same. But at the same time, it's also something that's very specific to mental illness, where people will say, "Well, he just came out of the loony bin. Maybe I don't want to call him. He just came out of the loony bin. Maybe I don't want to go on a date with him." I've experienced a lot of things like that. I've experienced a lot of things like, "Well, I'll call you later," and then they don't call. Or in fact, it happened to me today. I had a date with a girl, and she was going to come over and we were going to have dinner, and I was going to cook for her, but she stood me up. And weird thing is that she's in a mental health group with me. So I know it didn't have a lot to do with that, but regardless of whatever reasons, it's just like people tend to think of you as different. And when people think of you as different, they treat you differently. And that's the important thing. And that's my point tonight. Um, anyway, so some of the things that I've experienced, I think that with some of the judgments I've had, it's like people don't want to be in a room alone with you. They don't want to be left alone in public places. They think that maybe you'll overreact, or you'll underreact, or you won't act appropriately. And if I'm completely honest, there's been times when I haven't quite acted quote unquote appropriately because of my illness. And, I'm either I talk too fast, or I talk too much, or I act a little outrageous, or I act a little crazy, if that's the word you want to use. Not my favorite word, but I think the fact that people are always saying, well, you shouldn't say crazy. Well, fuck. I'm sorry. Well, crazy is crazy. And people use it all the time. And, so you need to understand that people do note things that are crazy about you and that are different. And anyway, so even within the family, I mean, I was adopted, and I was adopted at a very young age. I was adopted at I think something like 2 to 3 weeks old. And even within my own family, I've experienced, I think, about stigma. For a long time, I had a drug problem, and for a long time, that was probably related. People told me later it was probably related to your illness, but I don't really buy that. I think that the choices you make in life are up to you. Whether you're sick or whether you're not. It's like if you choose to use drugs, you choose to use drugs. Nobody's putting a joint in your hands. Nobody's sticking a needle in your arm. Nobody's putting a bottle in your hand. You choose to make those choices, and you act according to your conscience. And I always felt that whenever I did those things, I was doing them of my own accord. And I always felt good about it. I mean, I did drugs because they were fun. I didn't do them because I felt pressured by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't do it because I felt like I needed to prove anything to anyone. But anyway, so that's just some of the things. And then I think when I was 51, I got to know my real mom. In fact, she's the one in the picture behind me, and I think she even judges me a little bit for my stigma, and I think that she suffers a little bit from bipolar herself. And I know I've got a sister, a half sister, that suffers from bipolar, and that I've never met and don't much care to. She seems like not the nicest person. And she certainly doesn't want to get to know me. But anyway, So with all those things, I just kind of realized that, you have to find that fortitude to move forward, and you have to find that attitude to move along and to move on and to be your own person, because in the end, you're responsible to yourself and your own motivation to be who you need to be, and be on top. Because I mean, if I waited for permission to be who I needed to be, then I wouldn't get anywhere ever. And I don't choose to act my act that way or live my life that way. I live life on my own terms, and I'm very independent because of a friend of mine that helps me out. And even in saying that, it sounds counterproductive, but it's like because of her help, I'm able to lead a very independent life. And I think said even in my very first video, I said if you can find even one person that helps you, you're golden. And I still very much believe that. I think if you can find one person that believes in you and can help you support yourself and make it through it, that you've got the golden ticket to get through all this stuff. Because it is up to you how you lead your life, and it is up to you the choices you make. And don't compromise to please other people. Don't compromise to help someone else's perspective. You're in it for yourself somewhere, and you need to understand that. And so I just in saying that, I need you to realize that stigma is a very brutal kind of situation, and it's not going to be easy. I've said that before also in so far in the groups of videos, is that this is not an easy illness to deal with by any stretch of the imagination. You've got a lot of adversity, and it's an uphill struggle, and it's not simple. And you've got a lot of people that are going to try to stop you, and you've got a lot of people that say, I was having troubles with one of the nurses up at the VA once, and one of the patient advocates was telling me, you need to admit that you're helpless against your illness before I can help you. And it's like, I'm not helpless against anything. It's like those people that say, I'm helpless against the substance. I mean, it's like if you're strung out on a substance, it's not the substance that's defeating you. It's yourself that's defeating you. And the substance is an innocuous being. It's not something that has a characteristic. It's not something that has personality. It's not something that's active. It's something very passive. And so I'm very much a proponent of self-advocacy and saying, I'm going to pull myself up by my own bootstraps, and I'm going to make these things happen for my own sake. And so when it comes to stigma, my advice would be try not to worry too much about it. Try to do things your own way and believe in yourself. And so with that being said, I just want to say this is James Norton with Bipolar IQ. Please keep watching. I will continue to send. I don't know if I've told you this so far, but I feel myself I've been kind of referring to it as the shine is off the apple. I feel I'm coming down a little bit from my mania. And even though I'm awake and it's midnight, I'm still kind of having a hard time staying awake more. I'm sleeping more during the day, and I'm getting a little less motivated. But I want to continue these videos into my depression. I think it'll be fundamental to the show to see how people act when they are depressed, because if you see me crying or breaking down, that's going to be part of the show. I mean, it's just going to be because when you're just so sad you can barely stand it, that's part of the show. That's part of life. That's part of the illness. And so, and it's part of the stigma, because when people see you in a coffee shop crying with your friend because you can't do anything more, it's noticeable, and people do draw conclusions, and people do make judgments. So with that, I just want to say welcome to another episode of Bipolar IQ with James Norton. And remember, you are loved.